All right. So last week we began taking a look at self-care, and not unsurprisingly, it it took us much longer than I thought to get through it because this is something that is certainly personal to each of us, and it actually does affect each and every one of us. And I want to again encourage everybody to speak up. We're really going to workshop this today, and I don't know that this half of it will be as long as what we took last week. So I'm not sure how long this is going to take. But last week we talked about what self-care kind of is, because it's going to be different for everybody, right? And we talked about the components of self-care, some of the kind of the pieces. And so just as a quick review, and for Nikki, who wasn't with us last week, and I hope if you get a chance, you can take a look at what we did last week, so this week makes a little bit more sense. But kind of the working definition is that self-care relates to what you do in your life to look after your holistic well-being. And I really love that term. So that you can meet your personal and professional commitments. And honestly, it's not just about meeting our commitments. It's about being all that we can be and enjoying this life as much as we can possibly enjoy it. Because, why shouldn't we? Life is not supposed to be a vale of tears. I mean, there may be a veil of tears over it at times, and that's okay. But this is it. This lovely planet that we live on. Laura, I heard her telling Nancy this morning that we've been watching Star Trek Discovery, and periodically the starships will pull up on a planet, and you'll see whatever planet they've dreamed up. When I think about the vastness of space and, our little shiny blue ball and all the life it supports, I mean, we live in the middle of a trillion miracles, and it's just so easy to overlook. And because we do, I think that there's, if there's a better thing for us to do on this planet than be joyful, somebody tell me about it. And helping other people be joyful is probably, the only other thing that comes close. So sometimes in order to be able to do that, we got to make sure we help ourselves. And so that's kind of what self-care is all about. I'm going to take care of myself so I have the option to be joyful and to help spread joy. Because why wouldn't I? All right. So some of the areas that we talked about all these separately last week were, workplace or professional self-care. And, maybe as a subset of that, I've seen other lists that list financial self-care, which there's certainly a component to that. Physical self-care, which is pretty obvious. Psychological self-care, emotional self-care, spiritual self-care, relationship self-care. And the idea is you cannot pour from an empty cup, and you have to take care of yourself first. So last week we went through and we listed some examples of all those different kinds of self-care, and things that some of the I had some examples in the slideshow, and we talked our way through some of the things that that we do or that we could be doing that could be defined as self-care. And, if anybody's had any light bulb moments since last week about, oh, this is a really great thing to do, please feel free to speak up and share. But now what we want to do is we want to take a look at what does it take to put it together. So one of the big things about this, and I've got over here, I know Haley can't see it, but over on the side of this slide is 50 ways to take a break. And the idea is that the things that we're going to talk about today, they're only important if they are meaningful and sustainable to you and the goals you have for your own well-being. So this is really one of those places where you can't judge your inside on somebody else's outside. I mean, Laura might, talk about running 50 miles a week, and that's really not going to help any of the rest of us. But, we can certainly have our own physical self-care goals that are meaningful and sustainable. And sustainable is really, really the key here. If you're not going to keep doing it, it's not going to keep helping you. I mean, Lord knows, I wish that so many of the things that I do to take care of myself were one and done. Like about a year ago when we got locked in, I started doing weightlifting to a couple of the different things that are on Beachbody that Laura has on the Roku device. And this one that I kind of really got into was called Lift 4, and it's an 8-week program. Well, I would love it if I could stay pumped up from having just done the first 8 weeks and been like, oh, hey, I'm all swole. This is awesome. But it doesn't work that way. I have to keep going back through it and upping my weights a little bit every time, or it doesn't work. And, if I take time off, I kind of get, I kind of get unswole, my arms lose some diameter, and it's like, geez. Then the next, if I go back into it, it's like, oh, okay, I got to start with 5 pounds less than I ended up with last time. I just have to keep going. So all these things that we do have to be sustainable. So what I'm going to encourage everybody to do is to create a self-care plan. And, in the little picture over here, Haley, I have, it's Ignacio's self-care plan. And Ignacio has written in just like mind, body, and spirit bubbles. And then in each one of those has some different activities, and then has a couple of other little bubbles that are labeled supportive people in my life, and another one that says I want to accomplish. And the I want to accomplish includes things like peace and serenity and happiness and be a good person. So the idea was, from each category that we discussed, select at least one strategy or activity that you can undertake. And you might notice areas of overlap between these categories. Like in Ignacio's self-care plan, meditate shows up under both mind and spirit, right? And I could say, going back, I'm going to page back here to the quick review. If I look at this and I think about psychological, emotional, and spiritual, for me, meditation does all those things. And honestly, when I'm meditated up, I think my heart rate goes down. So that affects my physical. And, if I'm centered and I'm grounded and I'm not on edge, I'm a whole lot better off in my relationships and my professional life. And I've told you guys the story of having gotten through my deployments by meditating. So there are some things that we can do for self-care that are good for a lot of these, little aspects of our lives. And, it's probably a good idea to be pretty honest about what those things are and make sure that those are, kind of part of the daily plan as opposed to the weekly or monthly plan, right? So does anybody have any things that really help them, like in more than one area, you think? Okay. So in terms of working your self-care plan, one real easy thing you can do is just, go out to the interwebs and Google self-care plan. and you can download a plan template like the one that I have over here on the right. You can create your own. Different people like different formats and methods and whatnot. Now, as this one says, it's got all the 6 areas that we had talked about: physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, relationships, and workplace. And then it adds 4 other little places, one for overall balance, and like for me, I would say meditation is good for overall balance because it's good for more than one of those things, and then what might get in the way. And we'll talk a little bit more about, kind of mitigating obstacles in a little bit, and what negative strategies do you need to avoid? And you might ask yourself, well, why would I have a negative strategy? So I asked myself that, and the answer came to me immediately back when I still drank, but I knew I drank too much. Okay. I used to say to myself things like, okay, tonight I'm only going to drink beer. That's going to be my strategy. Or tonight I'm not going to drink on the way home. I'm going to wait till I get home to start drinking. Or, tonight I'm going to make sure I don't drink more than half gallon of booze. I'm cutting myself off at half gallon. They were strategies, but they were not really positive, if you know what I mean. And then kind of some carrot instead of stick. If you implement your plan, how might you feel? It's like, hey, if I do this, am I going to, I might feel really good about myself. I might just feel better because I'm doing good things for myself, but I might also feel better about myself for having done something good for myself. See, it's kind of like self-reinforcing. But different formats. I mean, for some people, a worksheet like this is great. Laura likes to work out of planners, like the book, the kind you can buy that have all the little, they're all the organizing tools in them. Somebody might like to have have a way that they use their planner, and maybe in their to-do list have a section under to-dos that deal with self-care. Some people might like working out a Google Calendar where you put it into your computer and you actually set an alarm, and it's like, oh, okay, it's time for me to meditate, or oh, okay, it's time for me to read something spiritual, or make contact with a supportive friend. I love that in Ignacio's plan back here, that was it seems kind of freehand and informal, and I like that. And but it has that section for supportive people in my life. And I have really discovered how important being part of a group of supportive people, or having other people that you can reach out to and support you, is during this pandemic. I think I've told you, there are a lot of times when my Wednesday night D&D group, we'll go on and on and on after we've quit playing. It happened again Wednesday before last. I think I cut the game off at 12 past 10, and we were still talking after 11 o'clock, on a school night, right? So it's having that group of supportive people. I mean, that's one of the things that's so wonderful about 12-step is, not only do we make you part of a group of supportive people, but we give you a person whose their job is to be supportive, your sponsor, right? So there's really something to that. We're not supposed to attack this life thing alone. It's a scary place out there alone. It's even a scary place in my head alone. So it's good to remember that we can call on other people. And I know as an introvert, and I think Natalie shared some pretty funny memes about this recently. You know, being an introvert, it's almost like you got to start doing your push-ups and stuff just to get ready to make a phone call. And it's like, oh, hey, you called me on the phone. That's a wrong answer. You know, you're supposed to text, because I don't like phone calls. You know, but the truth is, even introverts don't like to be ignored or forgotten. And even introverts need people. It's just after we're done with them, we need to go take a bath or, you know, read a book or something.
I've taken to declining offers to hang out, followed up with, but I really like to be invited. So please don't stop inviting me. Eventually I will come.
That is perfect. Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. So whatever method works for you. And this is, again, this is another place where we all just have to be honest with ourselves, and don't should on yourself. You know, it's like, oh, well, I should be able to do it. No, you do it the way that works for you. You know, if writing on your hand works for you, right? Write on your hand. That makes my skin crawl to think about it. I can't, that's why I don't have any tattoos. I can't write on myself. I can't have tattoos. I can't do that stuff. But if that works for you, you know, by all means, go for it. If carrying a little book around, you know, works for you, do that. If putting it in your smartphone and, you know, having it, you know, give you a notification alert, you know, whatever works for you. But expecting ourselves to just sort of remember it and do it because it's the right thing is just, that's not going to happen. One of the toughest thing that Laura is currently confronting in her job is the same thing I was confronting when I was the minister at Unity of Birmingham, and that is trying to change a culture will kick your ass. And what's the saying from the business book, Laura? Culture trumps, what is it?
What's the question again?
It's culture trumps something.
Oh, culture trumps strategy. Culture eats strategy for breakfast.
That's it. So, and it does. I mean, if my strategy is, well, I'm going to start, you know, doing these things, right? Because I know they're better for me. Yeah, that's a great strategy. It's you know, better than I'm only going to drink half the bottle of whiskey tonight. But it's a strategy. But the same thing is, if my culture, you know, if the way I've lived my life up till today, which is my interior culture, is, you know, yeah, I don't do those things, then even though I have this strategy to do them, I'm probably not going to do them so much, you know. So I have to rewire myself, and I have to develop different habits. Okay, just real simple thing. Having a messy place, it's not good for me mentally. I don't do well when my surroundings are chaotic. And, you know, I kind of glommed onto this back in the 90s when I was a sergeant in the National Guard. And I you know, used to keep saying a clean track is a happy track. A track is a tracked vehicle. You know, like I had a command track that I worked out of. It was like a armored personnel carrier that we ran the firing battery. I was part of an artillery battery. And I always found it better to have everything organized, and, you know, you always put the same thing back in the same place. So when we needed it in a hurry, there it was, right? And of course, I've, you know, read things about astrology that say it suggests this because I'm a Pisces, and we tend to, because we're water signs, we tend to be a reflection of our environment. You know, like water, when you pour it into whatever you pour it into, it fits the environment. Well, you pour me into a nice, neat, tidy environment, and I'm a nice, neat, tidy Pisces. But if you pour me into a mess, then I kind of turn into a mess. And there's something to that, whether it has to do with astrology or that's just the way I was wired. That's absolutely true. So I've found that if I make a habit of cleaning certain things and straightening certain things at, you know, like every day, that my day just goes better. So now every morning that we get up, I go and make the coffee. And then when I bring coffee into Laura while she's drying her hair, I will make the bed, but in between the time when she dries her hair and she comes and sits in our bedroom to do her makeup, and I sit with her and drink coffee. So by the time she and I are drinking coffee in our room together, the bed's already made and it looks good. And then, you know, right after she leaves for work and I fed the dog, I will unload the dishwasher from the night before, take, you know, any overnight dishes and the breakfast dishes and put them all in the dishwasher, clean off the sink and the counter, and the kitchen's clean. And I have a clean, so I have a, you know, my bed's made, my kitchen's clean, and my environment is nice. And but I had to get myself in the habit of doing that. And like, I just have certain cues, right? It's like, okay, the coffee's done. It's time to make the bed. That's what works for me. But it, you know, I had to sort of work my way into that habit. So we have to be honest with ourselves about what works for us, what we're actually going to do versus what we think we ought to do. Because you can should on yourself, and all that's going to do is keep you in the same level of self-care, except now you've added a layer of guilt. You know, you've sort of coated your I'm not taking care of myself with, and I feel guilty about it, right? That's not good. So this is pretty simple. You want to fill your self-care plan with activities that you enjoy and that support your well-being. And so, Haley, I have over here on in the image is a little self-care to-do list. It's just kind of artistically done. And, you know, it says things like rest, nap, sleep early, take a break, read a book, reconnect with someone you adore, journal or write about your feelings, do something that physically makes you feel good, drink your water, you know, plan a movie night. There's, you know, so many simple things. We, you know, self-care doesn't have to be, oh, well, I'm going to, you know, go to a ranch somewhere and get pampered for a week one of these days. You know, self-care can be as simple as I'm going to make sure that I spend a little extra time just catching up with some friends, or I, you know, that I finish my coffee before I run out, or, you know, whatever it is. There are simple things that we can all do for ourselves. You know, sometimes it might even be just a matter of, I'm going to spend a little extra, and instead of getting, you know, like the cheapest product, I'm going to get the one I like. You know, whether it's the orange juice or the face cream or, you know, whatever it is, you know, being able to demand of yourself that you can honestly say to yourself, I'm worth it, you know, and making a practice of that is so important. But allowing yourself to have fun. So some of you may have heard me tell this story. My dad, who was somewhat problematic, really, you know, toxic male. And you know what, it wasn't 100% his fault. I mean, it was it was the culture he grew up in. It was the environment he grew up in. He joined the Navy when he was 17 and got deployed into World War II. And you know, his dad apparently wasn't a real gem of a guy either, so he probably never had a chance. He was an only child. Just you know, had a lot of that going on. But so before he went overseas, he had graduated high school at 16 and gone to Marshall University in West Virginia, and he majored in music and phys ed. You know, now he ended up going into business, and you know, what was kind of sad to me was that the only time I ever saw him touch his clarinet was when he was falling down drunk. Every once in a while, he'd get really, you know, have a schnoz and a half full, and he would pull his clarinet out of the closet and play it. But he never did that as just a, hey, it's, it's Saturday afternoon and I'm going to play my clarinet for a while, or I'm going to be part of a local, orchestra or anything. He didn't allow himself to live into that area of his life that had brought him joy. It's one of the reasons that I chose to start doing a little bit of acting again. I don't want that to happen to me. I want to be able to keep finding my joy, even if it's not quote professional unquote, or even if it doesn't make me money some way. It's okay. It's okay for us to do things that we enjoy, just gosh darn it, because we enjoy them. Even as grown-ups, we're allowed to play. So it's important. It's because if we don't do things that are fun, and support our well-being, eventually we're not going to do them. And so our well-being does not get supported. And this is really a pretty key idea. When you create your self-care plan, you need to keep it where you can see it every day. For some of us, that might be on the mirror in the bathroom. For somebody, it might be on the refrigerator. For somebody else, it might be in their planner. For me, it would probably be on my computer screen, because that's what I'm looking at most of the day, right? And the reasoning, says keeping it visible will help you think about and commit to the strategies in your plan. Now, and this is another thing I like. You can also share it with your supervisor, colleagues, friends, and family, so they can support you in your actions. And I want you guys to know that I'm here to help, support you. And I know that pretty much everybody else in this community, if you want an accountability buddy, you can find one. We are here for each other. And, if you say, hey, I want to try to do this on a daily, weekly, whatever basis, because I know it's good for me, will you help me with that? I know that we absolutely would do that. So, and what's even more fun is, finding somebody that actually wants to do it with you. I know Laura was really, one of the things that she was bummed at leaving behind when we came here was some of the folks that she runs with. And, one of her running buddies is actually going to come here and help pace her in an ultra. And she's going to go and help pace her in like Arizona or something, and that's priceless. But people will help you if you ask. I know it's hard. It's hard to ask people, but it's worth it. And people want to be helpful. Stick to your plan and practice the activities regularly. And boy, is that ever absolute. That's the whole thing. On the slide, it says, just like an athlete doesn't become fit by just thinking about fitness, as a worker, you can't expect to perform effectively without putting into practice a holistic plan for your well-being. And forget as a worker, as a human being, right? As a worker, as a partner or a spouse, as a parent, as any of these things that we do, we can't perform effectively without having a holistic plan for your well-being. Do you know that the United States Army is actually finally recognizing this? And they're talking about holistic wellness for troops. Now, they're still expecting them to cram 25 pounds into a 15-pound sack when it comes to all the things you're supposed to do today. So some of that is just what we recognize this as a problem, and here's the lip service we're going to pay it. But, are we going to lighten the load? Well, yeah, probably not so much. But we're becoming more and more aware of the fact that, we have to have a plan and do these things regularly. So I know for me, it's only those things that I've done on a regular basis that have been helpful. That's why I still go to AA meetings. Yeah, I've I can't even tell you how many dozens of times, it may be getting, in the hundreds at this point, that I have heard somebody share at a meeting that the reason that they had a relapse was they quit going to meetings. If they just got tired of it, or somebody said something and they copped a resentment, or they decided they wanted their bowling league switch nights. I mean, there's just 1,000 reasons why we quit doing things that are good for us. And we forget. We forget what it was like before we started doing that thing that takes care of us. And then they go out, and if they're lucky, they survive and they come back into the meetings and say, okay, I'm gonna get serious and I'm gonna keep doing my meetings now. It's the same thing with athletes. It's the same thing with anybody that gets good at anything. It's because they keep doing it. I think Laura was talking about mastery, and that in order to really be a master at something, you have to have done it for 10,000 hours. Basically, to me, that's kind of like the 40 days and 40 nights in the Bible. It's just like, it just takes as long as it takes. And in the case of our well-being and taking care of ourselves, it takes the rest of our lives. I'm going to be going to meetings for the rest of my life. I know that. I also know that I'm going to be doing some kind of physical workout activity for the rest of my life. Now it's morphing as time goes by. And that's okay. And that's an area that we're going to get to in a minute. What we have to do with our wellness routine is we need to make sure that it is continuing to serve us, and that it is something that we can continue to do, so that we will continue to do it regularly and we will continue to benefit from it. So part of having any kind of strategy, whether it's self-care or my, personal goals, or our marriage goals, or my company's goals, right, is you have to assess what you're doing and see if it's working, so that if it's not, you change what you're doing. And if it is, you're going to keep doing what works. So the slide here says reassess how you're going to, how you're going at the end of 1 month and then at 3 months. And as it correctly points out, plans can take over a month to become habits. So check in and be realistic about your own self-care plan. After a month, you're like, okay, did I actually drink 5 glasses of water every day? All right. If I didn't, what do I need to change, so that I will drink that? Do I need to throw some Crystal Light in there? What do I got to do here? If I did, say, okay, let's keep doing that. So after a while, come back and complete the self-care assessment again and find out how you are going with your new habits. And the image I have is of a woman who's got a couple of different areas of her life surrounding her like little bubbles. And it says personal SWOT analysis to assess and improve yourself. And, I'm sure most of us are probably familiar with that acronym. SWOT is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you could actually take a look at, well, okay, what are the strengths of my self-care plan? What is it that's working? What are the weaknesses of my self-care plan? What are the things that I maybe kind of let slide, or if I said I was going to do them every day, I'm only doing them 2 or 3 times a week. And if I said I was going to do them every week, I've only done them a couple times this month, right? Opportunities. What are things that's like, oh, I probably should be doing this or doing this differently. And then threats. What are the things that, might keep me from executing my plan, or that, are keeping my plan from affecting me in the best possible way? So using that kind of analysis on your self-care plan, that's a real simple one, but it's one that may work. As I wasn't going to mention this, but it just popped into my head. So, I will mention, as a targeting officer in the Army, for years, a couple of decades, really, I was trained in a method called D3 Alpha, which stands for decide, detect, deliver, assess. And it's actually a circular targeting cycle where we decide what we're going to, do. We detect the target. We deliver whatever it was we decided to deliver to that target. And then we assess how we did. And depending on how we did, we might need to decide to do something different, or do the same thing, except do it right this time. And then go out and find it again, deliver again, assess again. And it's just constantly ongoing, decide, detect, deliver, assess. And, you could actually even think of assessing your own self-care plan that kind of idea. It's what did I want to do with it? What area of my life am I targeting? What do I think is going to help that area? All right, now I'm going to assess how did whatever it is I targeted my physical health with work? Did it help? Yes, no, some. Could I have done better? So it's not just a matter of saying, okay, now I'm going to do this thing that I read online was good for me, right? Now, after having done this thing that I read online was good for me for 3 months, is it really good for me, or is it just burning minutes out of my schedule, right? And if it is really good for me, then maybe I need to make room in my schedule for more of it. So one last thing. We might come up with the world's greatest self-care plan. You may go out on the internet and, pick and choose around and find like the self-care plan that's going to keep you happy, comfortable, thin, and, with a really low heart rate and, really great blood numbers and just, fabulously wealthy until you're 113 years old. But if you aren't capable of executing the plan because you have way too much stuff in your way, things like a job and kids and, mortgage or, real life, it's like Laura was talking this morning, she's leafing through her ultra marathon magazine. And she's like, some of these people run 100 miles a week. I don't know how they have time to, have a life and do that. Right. Well, maybe, if you're retired, if you're independently wealthy, if your, spouse is making, 6 figures, you have time to run 100 miles plus a week. Right. But if you're not that person, then that plan, the plan to run 100 miles a week is probably not going to work out well for you, right? So once you've created your plan, you have to ask yourself, what might get in the way, right? And then you ask yourself, what can I do to remove these barriers? So if you run up against something you can't remove, you might want to adjust your strategies. And I'll tell you what this reminds me of is when I was in the National Guard, anytime we would do anything that had any risk involved, and I mean down to we're going to do a road convoy from the armory to, camp hole in the ground, so we can spend the weekend and do our training, right? That road march, there's risk inherent in it. So we would do this risk assessment sheet. And what we had to do was write down the risks and then write down the strategies that we had to mitigate it. And if we couldn't mitigate the strategy below a certain level of risk, we had to have our commander sign off on it. Now, okay, real life, you don't have a commander, right? You're the master of your own domain, as they pointed out on Seinfeld. right? So it's up to you to decide what are the risks that I can overcome, and what are the ones that, hey, I just can't do that part of the mission. I'm going to have to change that because there's something that's just too big in the way. And I mean, it can be, well, I may decide I need to do some work-life balance, and as part of that, I'm going to leave work every day at 5 o'clock. Well, you might run into a problem with your boss if your boss is used to you staying late and not asking for anything extra for it. So you might want to, figure out, how am I going to mitigate that? What am I going to tell the boss when they say, you've left at 5 o'clock every day this week? That's maybe more helpful than just, yeah, boss, that's because we close. Right? So you want to set yourself up to win even against the obstacles. And when the obstacles are too great, then we just find a path of lesser resistance, right? All right. So my homework assignment is for everybody to work on a self-care plan and to actually begin to execute it. Now, this is something that I will tell you, it's kind of like working out. It's better to start slow and sustainable, and then to add pieces as you go. So if you're not doing any self-care right now at all, do your best to find something that will affect you in more than one area of your life, like meditation. And start doing that on the regular, even if it's only for 5 minutes a day. And do some something else that's just really simple, like, I'm going to drink X number of glasses of water a day, whatever it might be. Start small, see how you're doing, and then kind of ramp your self-care up. If you come up with, it's like, I've got the best self-care plan in the world. Well, what are you doing? Well, I've got, these 8 things I do every day. And then I do, these 4 things once a week. I do these 5 things once a month. I have stuff I do quarterly and every 6 months. Okay. That sounds like you got a really great plan there, but are you going to be able to go from 0 to 110 miles an hour? So in the interest of being sustainable, it's like I always tell people who I encourage to start meditating, start small. If somebody tells me they're, yeah, I haven't worked out since I was in high school, but I'm going to start working out, I'm like, okay, take it really easy to begin with, because what's going to happen if you don't is you're going to get really sore and you're going to quit, right? So start small, start sustainable, and then keep adjusting, assessing and adjusting as you go. And, I think you'll find that not only do you enjoy it, but you feel better about yourself. And I know for me, that has been, I've fought my self-esteem all my life. And for me to be able to know that I did something good today, like I finished my workout, I drank my water, I did my meditation, I did all those things. I feel better about myself when I do those things, and that's priceless.